stop. I can't pronounce this. This is the Tuttnauer 1780E automated autoclave. It's an excellent tabletop piece of equipment, very easy to use. Upon power up, it performs its own self-tests. And very easy to program, very easy to use, and it has some pre-programming in it that is very common to the standards for using autoclaves. For example, unwrapped instruments for use. You can switch to wrapped instrument configuration, as well as glass vessels and other glassware used in laboratories. And of course, just drying if you need to simply dry something out. The door is easy to operate, but should also be remembered because even though pressure from steam has been mostly exhausted, there's still a good bit of heat if you've previously used it for a couple of different runs. It's easy to load. It has a stainless steel carriage. That is capable of handling 3 different trays. And for purposes of our demonstration, we'll just use a common set of hemostats. All right. Now the door gasket is important to remember because once you close the door and you start to seal it down, you'll see that the indicator will come on that the door has been sufficiently closed. But from experience, you really do need ensure door tightness because you will get some water condensation if it's not tight enough. So you'll feel it, it'll come comfortably pretty much to a stop, and then you won't have any kind of leakage. You can separately set the temperature by either raising or lowering. It is suggested that for proper sterilization that the temperature be set between 250 and a maximum of 276 degrees. You can set the sterilization time from as few as 1 minute up to, I don't remember quite what it is, but it's significant, like several hours if you need to. You can also set the drying time as well. And this last display here is for pressure. For example, if the pressure should be too low, you will get an error display here that will say your pressure is too low. If your pressure is too high, the same thing will occur. It also monitors low temperature and high temperature as well. If, for example, you get a low heat indication. This one's important to remember because the most common one that you might see is low heat. And that would point to something that normally you would maintain. If you take off the cover, and this is right in the book here, they say it's the most common thing that can happen, is that what happens is there is an air jet. And if that air jet is not periodically cleaned, it'll result in a failure of spore testing. If you were to have a spore testing strip inside, it may not change color as it's supposed to. So even though this is periodically checked by maintenance personnel, it is important that even the operator who might alert the maintenance personnel be aware of this very simple little maintenance thing. It's very important. And periodically, if you take a look through here, you'll see that there's a little pin that sticks out. Now what that actually is a permanently mounted pin that cleans the little tiny jet valve in there. So you simply go in and move it back and forth in this fashion here. If you get a low heat error that will occur. But also in the manual there is a whole section on preventative maintenance and some suggestions as to when you should periodically set up a schedule for this. We set up the temperature for 250 degrees Fahrenheit. That means the autoclave will start to heat up. The normal process is it will fill partially with water. The heating process will begin, and once this temperature reaches its set point of 250 degrees, it will then switch to sterilization time. Now typically these times can be 30 minutes, 60 minutes, depending on the type of material or instrument that's being sterilized. For purposes of our demonstration, I've set it to 5 minutes. The next cycle would be after sterilization would come the drying time. The drying time is also accompanied by an automated exhaust. What this actually does is takes the steam pressure that was originally used during sterilization and it exhausts it out of the chamber. After that, there is a drying time partial cycle that will then allow it to dry completely, to try to exhaust as much humidity as possible, and then it will signal that the cycle has been completed. If for some reason you don't have the correct pressure within the range of what you're sterilizing, you will get an error that shows you have the wrong pressure. But typically, if you use their pre-programmed configurations for the different items that you use, it actually works very, very well. To start, you simply push start, and the first process will be the water entering the chamber, which lasts about 35 seconds. And we've moved on to the next cycle. From our previous run, we still have 159 degrees Fahrenheit, and it'll now heat up to 250 degrees before our next cycle. Okay, it has changed cycle from temperature warm-up. It is now in the sterilization cycle, which will continue for purposes of our demonstration for 5 minutes. Also, there's an indicator on the an indicator bar. This is very convenient. That will also show you when it is heating, when it is sterilizing, or going through any of the other cycles. The autoclave has now entered its exhaust phase before it moves on to its dry phase. This is, again, the exhausting of the pressurized steam that is built up inside. It is exhausted, indicating that the pressure has now been dropped inside the chamber. And it will now enter the last cycle of its drying time. Okay, it has completed its full cycle. It will display that cycle finish, and you can hit stop if you wish. The light has gone out for the door closed. You can open it up and you can take out your instruments. One last note, that in the event you want to stop the cycle, if you start a cycle, you have to remember that water is now filling the chamber. And if you were to just stop it and it would terminate the cycling of the program, you could open the door to the chamber, but water might flow out of the chamber that didn't have a chance to be exhausted. So even if you are in the middle of filling it, or it's in any one of the other cycles, if you hit stop, what will happen is it will exhaust, and after it exhausts, the fail simply is an indication that you stopped it in mid-cycle. That can be stopped. It will return to normal operating mode, and with having been exhaust, you shouldn't have any spillage outside. Very efficient, very simple to use, and very reliable.